The last time I was going over some ideas and developments on an engine for like a point and click, which still pursuing, but as a tangent. So I originally had a few ideas in mind when I decided to start developing these things, and I decided I was going to juggle them. So right now I'm going to pivot away, and this week I've been working on the startup infrastructure for an MMO, which is it's not just a high goal, it's literally overly ambitious, but just for funsies, gonna play around with the idea at least. So this isn't gonna be like your World of Warcraft MMO per se, or you run around, you click stuff, your point and click MMOs really, but it's gonna be more of an action shooter, and it gets that idea, that inspiration from this old timey game I used to play called Infantry Zone, and then it's mixed in with some other things like Rose Online, which is one of those point and click World of Warcraft type. And a separate game that has a lot of action, has a multiplayer, it's great, it's called Helldivers, and I guess you could throw in some other things I've taken inspirations from. So the first thing I do is I go onto Pinterest, and I just look up some things to fill up an idea board, just so later I can make some character concepts with some ideas that have been gathered. So the main things I'm going for right now is kind of, baggy, attitude-ish clothes, military garments, chibi-style characters, preferably with mechanized gear on, and maybe some kind of, ghillie suits. It's kind of a hodgepodge, really. But from there, I move on to concepting a basic outline of what I want the character proportions to be. And so this is what I have, but this is after testing out a few different proportions. From here, I lighten it up and I print out a few copies, and then I draw over those copies, find which one I like, and then transfer it to a more rendered version with some markers. It's mostly just grays, but cool grays, neutral grays, and warm grays. And from there, I create model sheets. And so for the model sheets, I start with just the bare, the birthday suit version. So for the modeling process, I will scan in the model sheets and then import it into Blender, and then I'll split it out into the front and the side. I'm going to make two separate meshes, and they're just going to be outlines of the forms with edges and vertices. And from there, I'm just going to line them up where the modeling sheets would have been and use those instead, so I can see right through them with really thin lines. It's a crude trace of it. After I have the outline that's based off the modeling sheet, I move on to modeling. And to start off with, basically for the arms and legs, I'm going to start with a circle or a cylinder and just basically trace along on one plane, like maybe the front plane, and then I'll move to the side plane and readjust it. And I'll do that for as many types of tube forms and cylinder forms that I can. The connections of the legs to the waist, the arms to the chest and the arms to the clavicle and the neck to the head, and the head to the rest of it presents more of a challenge than just the arms, the cylinder forms. And I'll deal with those, although it's not too much of a problem, especially because we're dealing with low poly forms here. Now for the fingers, I wanted to stylize it. Basically, they've only got 2 fingers and a thumb. The main finger, pointer finger, is for pointing, and it's also the trigger finger, and then the other finger represents basically every other thing besides the pointer. For the facial expressions, I didn't want to do anything that was too complex computationally. We don't want bones, and I opted against shape keys. What we're going to do instead is just use replacement animations. That means in front of the face, we're going to have these UV map plates that are going to show the image, the texture of the facial expression. And then whenever we change expression, we change the UV mapping, which will then point to another different facial graphic on a sprite sheet. And then we set up the armature for weight painting and to have bones, but we're not going to create a rig for this because it's simple enough to where we can just ignore it. It's just a dummy test asset that we need to just get out there. So bringing it into Unity, we only have the 3 animations, the idle, the walk, and the run. One of the goals I wanted for this game was the ability for it to play in the browser, which means the networking protocol needed to be WebSockets. So WebSocket Sharp was used to test in the editor, and if I ever build for PC or Android, iOS, or anything like that. But for the web browser, pure WebSocket Sharp wouldn't work, so a library called Hybrid WebSockets was used, which uses WebSockets from the browser when it's played in the browser, or WebSocket Sharp to be used when it's played in a non-browser platform. For the server, a C++ desktop application was built that uses WX widgets for the GUI and uses a library called Simple WebSocket Server, which requires OpenSSL. The networking works because the server, that's written in C++, agrees with the client written in C# what the various messages are. The only problem is, as new messages are needed, we need to keep track of even more code that needs to be synced up together. And so instead of doing this by hand, a program was written where a text file would define in a custom format all the messages and the types, and whether a client or a server can send and receive these messages. And then by running the program on the file, all the code in C++ and C# for the networking would be auto-generated. I also wanted to play around with the idea of changing your apparel and your armor and being able to visually see that. So I modeled the armor and I rigged it separately from the body, but using the same armature that the body was rigged to. Also, a helmet piece was created that was separate from the armor mesh and from the body mesh. It's not rigged to the body, but is made to fit on the head when parented to the head. When wearing a suit but not a helmet, the head may still be shown. So in order to make sure that's possible without having the body clip through the armor, we make a version of the head that's just by itself, that's rigged to the same skeleton, but that does not have the body, so we can disable the body when they're wearing armor. So this is the server here, C++ program. Hit F5, start to run it. We have this Hello World program that's been reconverted to the server output and the server itself. This is the game here. We'll play that, and then we can connect, and this will output us information. So we could hit left and right to turn, hit Alt left and right to sidestep. It's a little slow right now, but that's adjustable later. Okay, and then hit forward and backwards to move forward and backward. And this is the world. Right now it's just a flat plane, so we can't fall off the world or anything. That's just all visual. But if we keep moving for a while, I think past 10 seconds, then we'll actually start to go into running mode here. And that's like for fast travel. If I go up to this guy, hit enter, then what happens here is the client sees that this is close enough, so it'll say I'm interacting with this thing. It'll tell the server that, and the server will see that it's close, that you are close enough to that thing, just to validate, so you're not like hacking somehow. And then it will perform the action of the object. Right now it's just to it changes the uniform you have to something random, and it's between three things: either the birthday suit, the red suit, or the white suit. And these are all separate assets, not just a color change. It is a color change, but they're also just the same assets that have the colors changed, but they're actually separate assets. So if they were something completely different, you would see something. I'm sure you get the idea. And let's use this porta potty here. Hit enter, and that'll put one of 4 different helmets on. Okay, so it's either the red, green, blue, or the no helmet. And, you know, for wardrobe change, it doesn't make sense. But as far as being able to like interact with the world, to perform an action, or maybe to pick up an item on the floor, maybe some loot, and just the fact that we can change, the server can tell the player or players about a wardrobe change, about an outfit change. So if I go to the website locally where I'm hosting it, if I go here, you know, he has the starting item there, and that matches what we see on the guy who's wearing that. So I could go here and, you know, get an outfit of my own on this side. And then let's actually take the helmet off. And then if I look at this guy, then we can see where the emoting in those faceplates, the replacement animation comes in. And it doesn't have to be symmetrical either. So here's the wink. Whoops, wrong side. So there. And he actually blinks on normal intervals too. All these characters do. That's the client will do that client side. The server is not like sending out wink messages or blink messages every so often. So this is just one eye. It has 6 different shapes, and then for the other side, the other eye, we just, you know, invert the X, and then we have 5 different mouth shapes. Since he has a uniform on, we actually show we use the isolated head model I was talking about earlier instead of the full body model. And then if you were to, whoops, wrong side, getting mixed up here. If you were to shed this outfit, then we'd expose his whole body again. All right. What we're doing here to wear the uniforms is we actually have a separate mesh that spawns on him, which is, let's see, we'll actually show it right here. This outfit right there. And then inspector, if we turn that off, that's just, you know, that's what used to be the entire body model. And then we add the uniform, and then we tell it that it has the same bones, and we parent it to the root. And so because of that, it'll actually transfer the animations of the body onto the uniform part too. And then I can show duplicate. And so we have this login system here that's also being tested, but right now we don't verify it against any kind of user database. The only thing that really needs to happen to have a successful login is the password needs to be test. If it's not test, it'll be rejected. But here's this guy. Duplicate. We'll add like some more guys in just to show. Oops, wrong thing. And these guys are like right on top of each other because they all spawn at the world origin with identity rotation. So, oh, this guy, let's have him move out. And this game is meant to be played top down, so this doesn't really help too much. It's more just to see the faces, the whites of their eyes, even though they have no whites. There's several problems with the emoting right now. One is up here you can't really see them emote, even when they do, except for like the really pronounced stuff. And the other stuff is if they're wearing helmets, you can't see it. You can't even see what you're doing yourself as far as emotes go. That's another issue, but there's also chat here. Chat. The first time it just adds it to the end. It doesn't do it on a new line, but afterwards it's... And again, this is in the browser, this is in a server. This is going, even though it's localhost, is where the page is, but where I'm connecting is going outside of the network back into that IP you saw. And the networking needs to be fixed up more too, because right now, every message that happens in the world is sent to every player in the world, but eventually I want it set up to where we have everything tracked in a quad tree, and then we track what is around every player, and then we only send the messages to the players that are relevant to the objects around them. Like if something's happening miles away, they don't have a client, won't have a 3D model for it, and they won't receive network messages until it reaches in their vicinity. At which time the client will tell them to create a stand-in for it, and will start sending the network messages to control it. And then if they ever get too far away from it, not that it died or actually got removed from the actual world here, but just from their representation, we would tell them to get rid of it for now if they're too far away, just so they don't have to receive messages for it, and so it's not lingering around client side.